FarFaria.
Princess and the Pea, written by Hans Christian Andersen, retold by Christine Sawinski, illustrated by Niaiko Ing. Once upon a time, there was a prince. He lived in a big castle, but the prince was lonely. He really wanted to marry a princess. He looked and looked for a princess. Many girls said they were princesses, but none of them were princesses. The prince was so sad. One night it rained and rained. The prince saw a girl outside the castle. The prince ran outside and let her in. The girl was very wet from the rain. Her dress was wet. Her hair was wet. She said she was a princess. The queen gave the girl some dry clothes. She said the girl could stay for the night. The queen wanted to find out if the girl was a real princess. The queen went to the room where the girl was going to sleep. "I will put this green pea under her mattress," the queen said. "Then I will put lots of mattresses on top of it." The queen added, "A real princess will feel that tiny pea." Later that night, the girl went to her room. She climbed to the very top of the mattresses and lay down. In the morning, it was time to eat. The princess did not look happy. "Are you okay?" the queen asked. "I felt something in my bed," the girl said. "It kept me up all night." The queen and the prince were very happy. The girl had felt the pea under the mattresses. She was a real princess after all. The prince loved the girl. The girl loved the prince. They got married and lived happily ever after.
Rapunzel from Grimm's Fairy Tales, retold by Keisha Senf, illustrated by Morrow Rogers. There once was a young girl named Rapunzel. She was known for her long and beautiful golden hair. Rapunzel and her mother lived in a small cottage on a hill. From their window they could see a magical garden. It belonged to an evil witch. One day Rapunzel's mother was sick. She lay in bed, staring out the window. "If I ate just one vegetable from that magical garden," she whispered, "I know I would be well again." That night, Rapunzel climbed the high stone wall that surrounded the witch's garden. She filled her basket with vegetables and quickly ran back home. The next morning, Rapunzel made a thick soup with the vegetables. She gave it to her mother. "This soup is so good," her mother said. "I feel so much better." Rapunzel was overjoyed. Suddenly, the front door burst open. "I know you stole vegetables from my garden, girl," yelled the ugly old witch. She grabbed Rapunzel by the arm and dragged her from the cottage. The witch locked Rapunzel in a high tower with no door and no stairs. There was only a small window at the very top. Rapunzel spent her days sitting in the tower window, singing with the birds. One day, a brave knight followed the sound of Rapunzel singing. When he saw her, he instantly fell in love. The knight hid when the witch approached. He watched as she called out, "Rapunzel, let down your hair." The girl threw her long braid from the window, and the witch climbed to the top. The next day, the knight returned to the tower. "Rapunzel, let down your hair," he cried. Rapunzel let her long braid drop from the window. The knight quickly climbed up. Kneeling before Rapunzel, the knight said, "Beautiful maiden, I am here to rescue you." "But how are we to escape?" she asked. The knight drew his sword. With a single stroke, he cut Rapunzel's braid from her head. He fastened one end to the bedpost and threw the other end out the window. "Let's go," he said. The two hid in the woods until the witch appeared. They watched the witch climb the tower. When she reached the top, the knight jumped out. He set the rope of hair on fire. "I have been fooled," the witch cried. Rapunzel and her brave knight climbed onto his horse and rode away. They lived the rest of their lives happily ever after.
Thumbelina, written by Hans Christian Andersen, retold by Julie Ann White, illustrated by Crystal Chan. There once lived a woman who wanted a child. One day, she asked a nice fairy for help. The fairy gave her a magic seed. "Care for it well, and you will get your wish," the fairy said. The woman planted the seed in a pot of soil. She made sure it got lots of sun and water. Soon, the seed grew into a pretty yellow tulip. Inside the tulip was a beautiful girl. She had silky yellow hair and sparkling green eyes. She was no bigger than the woman's thumb. "I will call you Thumbelina," said the woman. Every day, Thumbelina would help her mother with the chores. Thumbelina would sing while they worked. Thumbelina loved to sing. She had a beautiful voice. Thumbelina and her mother were very happy. One day, a frog heard Thumbelina singing. He decided he wanted to marry her. That night, the frog hopped in through a window. He took the walnut shell where Thumbelina slept. The next morning, Thumbelina woke up. She was trapped on a lily pad. She did not want to be the frog's bride. He was slimy, and all he said was, "Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit." Thumbelina cried and cried. A fish heard Thumbelina's cries. He felt sorry for her. When the frog wasn't looking, the fish chewed through the stem of the lily pad. The lily pad began to float away. Thumbelina thanked the fish and waved goodbye. She floated downstream and looked for a new home. Soon, she came to a village of water beetles. They were not very nice to little Thumbelina. "Look how ugly she is," the beetles said. "She has only 2 legs and no wings." Thumbelina did not stay long with the mean beetles. She went down the river again until she came to a green field. Thumbelina spent the warm summer in the field. She ate nectar from the flowers and water from the buttercups. She was happy. Summer turned into fall. It began to get cold. A friendly field mouse invited the little girl to live in her warm home. Thumbelina happily said yes. Soon she met Mr. Mole, who lived nearby. Mr. Mole wanted to marry Thumbelina. But Thumbelina did not want to marry Mr. Mole. He lived underground. If they married, Thumbelina would have to live underground too. She did not like that idea. In the middle of the winter, Thumbelina met a sick swallow. She loved birds with all her heart. She took care of the bird until it got better. "Would you like me to fly you away from here?" the swallow asked Thumbelina. "Then you won't have to marry Mr. Mole." "Oh, yes," said Thumbelina. She climbed onto the swallow's back, and off they went. They flew high over forests and lakes and mountains. Thumbelina held on tight. They landed in his nest at the edge of a meadow. The meadow was warm and filled with pretty flowers. "I will live in my nest," said the swallow, "and you can live in one of these flowers." The swallow flew her over to the prettiest flower in the meadow. In the center of the flower stood the handsome fairy king. He was tiny, just like Thumbelina. He had wings on his back and a crown on his head. The king fell in love with Thumbelina. The two were soon married. All of the other flower fairies came to the wedding. Thumbelina and the king lived happily ever after.
Sleeping Beauty from Grimm's Fairy Tales. Retold by Olivia Gray. Illustrated by Kayla Skog. Once upon a time, in a land far away, a princess named Rose was born. The king and queen held a great feast to celebrate her birth. The entire kingdom, including Rose's 4 fairy godmothers, came to the castle for the grand event. The fairy godmother presented gifts to Rose. "My gift is a kind heart," said the first. "Mine is the gift of a playful spirit," said the second fairy godmother. "Mine is the gift of wisdom," said the third. Suddenly, a great crash of thunder erupted in the sky. The doors to the hall burst open. In stepped the evil empress, who ruled the dark forest outside the kingdom. "It seems you forgot to invite me," the empress scolded the king and queen. "No matter, I have my own gift for the sweet princess." The empress walked to the crib and looked down at the sleeping baby. "Yes, princess, you will grow up to be kind and playful and wise. But in your 18th year, you will prick your finger on a spinning wheel and fall dead." The thunder crashed again, and the evil empress disappeared. The king and queen were frightened. "What can we do to save our child?" the king cried. The 4th fairy godmother now gave her gift to Rose. "I cannot change the empress's spell," she said, "but I can soften it. Princess Rose will not die, but will fall into a deep sleep. Her true love's kiss will revive her." As she grew, Princess Rose displayed all of the virtues her fairy godmothers had given her. She was kind and wise, and she brought joy to all those around her. But the king and queen remembered the evil spell and worried about Rose constantly. The guards watched over her day and night. One day when Rose was 18, she decided to explore the lands around the castle by herself. She slipped away from the guards. Soon she came upon a cottage. An old woman sat by the door, spinning thread on a big wooden wheel. "Hello, child," said the old woman. "Come see what I'm spinning." The spinning wheel turned round and round. Rose was spellbound. She reached out a hand. When Rose's finger touched the thin spindle, she crumpled to the ground. The old woman looked down at the princess and smiled. Thunder boomed, and the old woman turned into the evil empress. She laughed and disappeared. Princess Rose was laid on a bed of gold and covered with blankets of the finest silk. Her 4 fairy godmothers watched over her. The king and queen sent word to kingdoms far and wide. They asked for brave knights and handsome princes to come to the castle and try and break the sleeping spell. Day after day, the kingdom welcomed its gallant visitors. One by one, they knelt by the princess and kissed her cheek, but none of them could wake Rose. Finally, the king and queen ordered the fairy godmothers to cast a sleeping spell on the entire castle. It would only be broken when the princess awoke. Many years later, a young prince came to the old, crumbling castle. He went inside and wandered its quiet halls. In the kitchen, cooks were fast asleep on the countertops. Sleeping maids were leaning against their brooms. Court musicians were slumbering on their instruments. Finally, the prince wandered into the princess's chamber, where he came face to face with the 4 fairy godmothers. "Please, kind prince," said one, "a single kiss from the princess's true love will break the sleeping spell. Are you her true love?" The prince knelt down beside Rose and kissed her on the cheek. The princess stirred, then opened her eyes. "I had the most wonderful dream," she said softly. "I dreamed of my true love. I dreamed of you." All over the castle, men, women, and children awoke. The king and queen rushed to the princess's chamber. Rose was there with the prince who had broken the spell. The king and queen held a great feast to celebrate the wedding of Princess Rose and her true love. And they all lived happily ever after.
Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. From the Arabian Nights. Retold by Olivia Gray. Illustrated by Leah Marcoux. Once upon a time, a boy named Aladdin lived in a bustling city in Arabia. Aladdin was poor. He dressed in rags and had little food to eat. He spent his days in the market, doing small chores for money and begging for coins. He vowed that someday he would be as rich as the Sultan. One day, a magician arrived in Arabia. He had a secret plan to steal a great fortune. He needed a strong boy to help him. In the market, the magician noticed Aladdin. "I see you are very poor," the magician said. "Follow me, and I will make you rich." The two went into the desert, crossed a great valley, and came to a dark cave. "In the cave, there are 2 lamps," the magician said. "One has great powers, and one is worthless. Bring me the golden one, and I will give you a reward. But touch only the lamps, or you will be trapped forever." Aladdin climbed down into the narrow, damp cave. He reached the bottom and saw a great cavern. The sun began to rise. It shined through a tiny hole in the ceiling. The bright light bounced off giant piles of rubies, emeralds, diamonds, gold, and pearls. Aladdin spotted the lamps and rushed toward them. "The magician can have his lamp," he thought to himself. "I can sell the other in the market." He grabbed them and climbed back up to the mouth of the cave. "Help me up," Aladdin said to the magician. "Of course, but first give me the lamp," the magician replied. Aladdin handed him the golden lamp. Instead of pulling Aladdin to safety, the magician sealed the cave and ran away. Aladdin sat in the cave and wondered what he should do next. He pulled the second lamp from his vest and held it in his hands. It was dusty, so he used a corner of his shirt to polish it. A puff of smoke rose from the lamp and filled the cavern. When the smoke cleared, Aladdin saw a figure floating before him. "I am the genie of the lamp," he said. "Your wish is my command." "I wish to go home," said Aladdin. In the blink of an eye, Aladdin was sitting in his humble home. Thinking he had imagined the whole thing, Aladdin pulled the lamp from his vest pocket. He rubbed it once more. Again, the genie appeared. "What is your wish, master?" At that moment, Aladdin heard loud music and excited voices through his window. He looked out and saw the Princess Badura being carried through the street. Aladdin fell instantly in love. "I wish to have enough riches so that the princess will love and marry me," Aladdin said to the genie. Aladdin was instantly transported to a magnificent palace. The walls were covered with beautiful tapestries. The windows and doors were encrusted with jewels. The furniture was made of luxurious fabrics. Aladdin looked at his reflection in the mirror and saw he was dressed in robes of gold. Aladdin traveled quickly to the palace where Princess Badura and her father, the Sultan, lived. The Sultan was impressed by Aladdin's great wealth. Princess Badura was charmed by his warm smile and knew she would be happy with him. They were married at once. The new couple lived happily in Aladdin's grand palace for many years. The magic lamp sat on a shelf in the palace, but Aladdin never needed it again. His every wish had been fulfilled.
Beauty and the Beast, from a French folktale, retold by Olivia Gray, illustrated by Julie Kang. A poor merchant lived in a small village with his daughter, Brianna. He loved his daughter very much and wanted to give her everything her heart desired. He knew Brianna's greatest wish was for a single, perfect rose. Roses were rare in their village, but the merchant had heard of a castle deep in the dark forest where the flowers bloomed freely. On the day before Brianna's birthday, he set out to find it. After much walking through the forest, he came to a crumbling castle. Its gardens were overgrown with roses. The merchant was so happy. He searched the gardens for the perfect rose. His eyes settled on the biggest, most beautiful flower. He reached out and snapped the flower from the bush. A dark figure suddenly appeared behind the merchant.
"Thief! How dare you steal my roses?"
said a thunderous voice. Before him stood a great, hairy beast dressed in fine clothes. The beast grabbed the merchant. "Oh, it is for my daughter, Brianna," the merchant said. "It is her birthday. Her one and only wish is for a perfect rose."
"Stealing is a crime," growled the beast. "Go home and return tomorrow with your daughter. I will tell you your punishment then. If you don't return, I will find you."
The merchant apologized and rushed home. When they returned to the castle, the beast spoke again.
"Merchant, you should be locked in the dungeon for stealing, but I will forgive your crime if your daughter agrees to visit me each day in my garden."
The merchant was about to refuse when Brianna said, "Father, you took the rose for me. I will do as he asks." Every morning, Brianna traveled to the castle. She was terrified of the beast. When he would try to walk beside her in the garden, Brianna would tremble with fear. The beast tried his best to be kind to the girl. He knew that his appearance made people afraid. One afternoon, Brianna began crying.
"Do not cry, Brianna," said the Beast. "I know that you are scared of me. I promise I will never hurt you." The Beast began to hand Brianna a bouquet. As he drew near, he slipped on a muddy puddle. He tumbled to the ground. The roses flew everywhere. Brianna could not help but laugh. The Beast at first grew angry, but seeing Brianna's beautiful smile melted his heart. The two laughed together as Brianna helped him from the mud. Over the course of the winter, they spent a lot of time talking and laughing together. When spring arrived, they were close friends. One morning, Brianna arrived at the garden and did not see the Beast anywhere. When he did not show up in the afternoon, she became worried. She heard a soft whimper from outside the garden. She followed the sound and found the Beast. He was lying on the ground, bleeding from a gash in his arm. Brianna kneeled beside the Beast. He growled in pain, but Brianna was not scared. She quickly wrapped a cloth around his wound. She gave the Beast a gentle pat and kissed him on the cheek. A great mist encircled the Beast. He was transformed into a handsome prince before Brianna's eyes. "I have been under an evil curse for many years," said the prince. "Your kindness has broken the spell. My castle and its gardens are yours, along with my heart." Brianna smiled. She loved the prince too, not for the handsome man he had become, but for the kind heart he had always shown. The two were soon married. Every day they walked through the gardens, and every day the prince happily gathered the best roses for his beautiful bride, Brianna.
FarFaria!